Little Archie, issue 73, some change. Sabrina's coming home from school when a woman just stands there while saying that a kitten's going to be killed because it's on a log that's heading towards a waterfall. Sabrina uses magic to make the kitten fly off the log, and she doesn't erase the mortal's memory of seeing this, even though she's not brushing this off as a hallucination. I have to assume this confirms that Sabrina can't erase memories because she doesn't know how yet, and that she doesn't know any witches can do that, other than Merlin. Or she would have warped her aunt here to do that. And of course she can't get away with warping the head witch here without telling him first. This whole story could have been avoided. Instead, the news lady wants Sabrina's name and follows her home, planning on publishing a story in the newspaper that Sabrina is from a family of witches. Why would that story ever get published? Nobody would believe her. It does show off what happened if her friends all found out her secret, but we could have assumed all of this would happen. Reggie says he always knew it. Sabrina's friends show up to walk her to school, and they all decide to take advantage of her, because they know she's still a good, helpful person instead of suddenly thinking of her as a terrifying monster because they know she's omnipotent. Surprisingly rational of them. So Reggie tells Sabrina to get him on TV with her powers. At least he said first. Archie shows Sabrina herself on the newspaper, and Moose, or some kind of other bully, says he wants an A on his report card. Dilton says he'd like a set of encyclopedias. That's a harmless wish to grant. She could easily tell Fang that granting his wish would be wrong, and grant Dilton's wish. And explain to Reggie that maybe he shouldn't be on TV because he's obnoxious and people would insult him for it for a while. Though he wouldn't believe her. Fang says he wants more home runs, and out of nowhere, Veronica says she always wanted blonde hair, even though that's associated with Betty. And she could always buy blonde hair dye. It would make more sense for Veronica to wish that Archie would only want to date her. Sabrina runs away instead of simply granting Veronica's wish and telling Fang why she shouldn't grant his. He doesn't have blonde hair, so I guess he's not Moose. But I figured it was an art mistake because he's still big and likes sports. Archie really wants her to show him some magic, and Sabrina gets mad and says that if they don't leave her alone, she'll turn them into goats. At this point in the Little Archie comic, it seems out of character for her to lose her temper and behave this way instead of just trying to reason with them like an idealist. Wish she did that instead. They should know that she might not want to grant wishes that let them cheat in school and sports. Jughead's somehow brave enough to stick with Sabrina after that, and asks what's wrong with goats because his father says he eats like one. Why would that be a besides? That'd be the only reason he'd say that. Realistically, he's also still here because he wants her to give him some food. She gives him the 50 cents to actually buy a hamburger rather than conjuring one up, because she wants to encourage him to do that instead of hitting her up for spells at every opportunity. I wish she explained that she wants him to buy his food because it's the right thing to do instead of cheating Pop-Tay out of money. Then it'd make perfect sense instead of her looking like she's too lazy to just give him food and save his parents money. She could have also explained to that crowd that she'd run out of magic if she used too much of it in one day. Weatherby says he wants Sabrina to represent the school in the talent show with her magic. She doesn't want to, but he says she'll bring glory to the school. Where's Merlin in all this? He submitted her name after he read the newspaper. To be fair, Sabrina's bad at hiding her powers. Even the first story had Jughead and Reggie see things that revealed magic. So it can't make sense that everyone would immediately believe the story about her from a newspaper, because they'd all remember the times they saw witchcraft, and it'd explain why they did. Sabrina thinks that no one seems to realize witches aren't supposed to do magic just like that. She should be written to think, because the head witch Merlin would punish us. She says she's gotta convince everyone she doesn't have powers. So she casts a spell and thinks that she's the first witch who ever wished bad luck to herself. So we have to see a bunch of bad things happen to Sabrina. Weatherby assumes that a kid with magic wouldn't do all that to herself. Why does he think she did all that to herself? It's irrational of him to assume that she doesn't have powers just because some bad things happened to her that could happen to anyone if they didn't anticipate it. The only reason he'd immediately believe the newspaper about her is if he thought it made sense because he remembered the times he witnessed magic around her. What should have been written is that Sabrina simply brainwashed people into coming to the conclusion that Weatherby did. The only way this could make sense is if everyone coming to this conclusion was just a part of the bad luck spell. But it would be bad luck for her if people kept knowing she was a witch. The story ends with Weatherby saying to the news people that only a crazy person would think Sabrina had powers. Why didn't Merlin get involved in this kind of plot? I have to just assume it's because he's well aware that every time a witch's secret gets out, they do end up casting the spell Sabrina did, or brainwashing. So unlike in the other continuities, the head witch has the good sense to realize that some problems always take care of themselves. This plot was about a news lady seeing Sabrina save a kitten from falling over a waterfall in a log, and we just have to assume that Sabrina can't erase her memory of it because she doesn't know how yet, or that witches other than Merlin can do that, because her aunts might think she'd use that power on them. So, somehow one news lady doing a story on what only she would testify to seeing caused the story to be published in the newspaper. I wish it was explained that her boss saw Sabrina use magic too, so he'd have reason to believe her. And everyone believes the story just because it was published in the newspaper, even though it's about Sabrina being a witch. It sure is lucky that people only became afraid of Sabrina when she threatens them to get them to leave her alone, which by itself was out of character at this point. She's always been the type to want to jump at the chance to help her friends with magic. Just an issue ago we had a story where Sabrina wanted to see all of her friends' wishes come true. If we were seeing how the plot would actually go, we'd see people get annoyed with her for refusing to grant wishes that aren't moral. Kid or not, she should have enough of a spine to do that because she can defend herself with magic. And she'd gladly give Dilton and Jughead and Veronica what they want. She could brainwash people into accepting that she doesn't want to grant some of their wishes. She could brainwash people into thinking she's not a witch whenever. So she won't think she has to not use magic around them if she wants to ever convince them she's not one. This is an exciting premise that's been a long time coming. I like that it wasn't too depressing because everyone still understood that she's still a good person. So they're responding too positively instead of too negatively, like most of the series would have us believe. Eventually she casts a spell to give herself bad luck, and somehow just because of that, everyone stops believing she's a witch, even though that explains everything. We have to make too many assumptions to make sense of the story. Like, why didn't the head witch get involved in a plot like this? We also could have seen Hilda and Zelda's reactions. Little Archie, issue 74, Monkey Business. I found this story in a $2 Sabrina story collection called Sabrina's Haywire Hexes. It starts out with Sabrina saying that one of these monkeys is Reggie, but she doesn't know which one, and her magic powers have failed. She says it all began when Reggie played too many practical jokes. He made Sabrina look through a telescope with wet paint, gets the paint on her clothes, and sprays her with water. She's right to say he has the brains of a monkey because it was stupid of them to do that to her, even without knowing she's a witch. She doesn't do anything that would make him think she deserves this, so he's just sadistic. Naturally, Sabrina was mad enough to turn him into a monkey, and this causes Archie to say at Pop Taste that he and his friends should try to catch the monkey. And somehow all of them run out thinking that's a good idea, when obviously a monkey could try to attack them. Jughead has no reason to think that monkey looks like Reggie. Sabrina feels bad about what she did already when she hasn't even returned her clothes and face to normal yet, and she finds out Reggie's not where she left him. It was pretty reckless of her to leave him unsupervised. Somehow Pop Tate plans on closing for the rest of the day after Sabrina gets told what happened. She tells him not to, and it turns out some adults in a limo want to join the kids near the monkey. Reggie runs past a guy with a monkey playing music on the corner. The two monkeys dance and get some applause. Veronica and Betty donate to the guy, who looks too much like Ambrose. Sabrina goes over to them all and turns a monkey into Reggie. Archie notices that he came out of thin air, and Jughead even notices that he's wearing the same clothes as one of the monkeys. So that first panel of the story was lying to us, because she had no problem telling you which one was Reggie, because of his clothes. I was misled into thinking she'd have a harder time than she did. All that running and dancing made the kids thirsty enough to go back to Pop Tate's for a soda. The story ends with Reggie wanting to hang from a tree and eat bananas, even though he doesn't remember being a monkey. This story was about Sabrina naturally getting mad at Reggie when he pranks her for no reason and turning him into a monkey. Then she leaves him unsupervised, but at least had the excuse that she was going to change clothes and didn't want to risk someone seeing her use magic to return to her normal appearance. Sabrina lucks out though and finds Reggie, but he's with another monkey that was dancing to music on the streets. But it doesn't matter because she knows he's Reggie. because she fortunately still had him wearing his clothes when she was turned into a monkey, which she could have very easily not done. So she had a close call. And I hate that the first thing I saw in the story lied to me, having the story build up to her not knowing which monkey was Reggie, when that's clearly not how it ends up being. Little Archie, issue 75, News from Home. Sabrina gets handed the newspaper, and despite being a little kid, she's still eager to catch up on all the news, even though it'd be depressing. Somehow she wonders if there's anything in here about her aunts. Well, they can use magic and are bad at hiding it, so maybe she's right to wonder if their escapades made on the newspaper, especially after 2 issues ago when that happened to her. She sees that a crime wave's hit her town and hopes they're alright. She asks how her aunts are doing without her in a spell and sees a secret meeting of mean-looking people who want to recruit someone to hit a certain house. I'm excited at seeing this because since the aunts have powers, these criminals aren't going to like dealing with them. Hilda sees a prowler outside her window, and somehow Zelda's scared and says she'll make sure her doors are locked when she can use magic, so they could do whatever they wanted and no one would believe him. Hilda says he's going down into their cellar, and somehow Zelda thinks they're both gonna get killed despite their magical powers. They wouldn't care more about hiding them than their own lives. Hilda says she's not old and says she's only 213 years old. I expect her to be 200 years older. Zelda reminds her they're witches. What took her so long? Hilda says they'll turn the tables on him and there's a crashing sound because she turned the ping pong table over on him. Zelda says what a racket, so Hilda has all of the paddles hit him. I'm glad she is smart enough to use magic on an intruder. Hilda makes him fall in a bucket of paint, which gets the ping pong ball stuck to him. And since he can talk, he can still breathe too. I guess he got the paint off his face first off screen. He says he quits and he didn't pass the test, and this happens once a month. Every time they go in the house to read the gas meter. And it's the gas company. You know, couldn't he have rang the doorbell and informed Hilda that he was going to read the gas meter first? Wouldn't they get into the habit of that? All of these people know this is a house for witches. Why do they keep getting gas if they can't read their gas meter? Sabrina's told to report to the main hall at the camp she's apparently at. Her aunts came to visit her. Somehow Sabrina asks how they both got here instead of assuming they teleported or flew. Zelda says the gas company set them up here in a special car. Hilda says the company wanted them out of the house while they'd send a man to read the meter. What took them so long to start doing that? I guess they do that every time. Why put a new recruit through this every month? I guess they sent him there hoping he'll get the idea with no prompting to tell the aunts he's going to read the gas meter first. And because he didn't, he failed the test. Why would they do that, Sam, just as a standard hazing every time they hire anybody? Zelda says that's nice and wonders if they do that for everyone, and the guy says that's how he keeps his job. This story seemed to be about a criminal breaking into Hilda's cellar and getting punished with magic. But then it takes a sad turn that wasn't necessary because it turns out this guy was in charge of reading their gas meter. And this happens all the time. So they need to get the aunts out of the house by giving them a ride to Sabrina's camp. I don't understand why they sent the new recruit to the house, risking all of that happening to him instead of just telling him to get them out of the house right away. Why were they talking like criminals if they weren't? Why did they say, hit her house? I guess that was just their sense of humor. Why wouldn't the guy in charge of reading their gas meter ring their doorbell first and tell them what he's gonna do? I guess him failing to do that was him failing the test. Little Archie, issue 76, Words of a Witch. Sabrina sees a book called Secret Words for Witches in her house, and here's Archie and Reggie fighting outside of her house. I guess they were gonna meet with her and then they started fighting, so that's why they're here. Sabrina says Jughead's gotta stop them because she doesn't want to see either of them hurt. Jughead doesn't want to because he finds the fight entertaining. They were fighting to see who takes Veronica out on a date. Sabrina recklessly casts a spell to summon 2 Veronicas at once for them. Naturally, Archie asks if her father knows he has twins. Conveniently, they stop questioning a panel later. I have to assume that's part of the spell. In the story where everyone found out Sabrina was a witch, they did ask her for wishes, but left her alone when she threatened them, and only Weatherby was actually shown coming to the idea that she isn't a witch. So maybe everyone else knows now and is just smart enough to not bother hitting her up because she'd threatened them for it. It turns out they were actually fighting over who has to tell them that neither one of them has the money to take Veronica out on a date, so apparently Jughead was wrong. I have to assume that Reggie spent all of its allowance already and can't hit his parents up for money easily. Sabrina casts a spell to summon a treasure chest with money for Reggie and Archie. But out of nowhere, instead of them deciding to take Veronica out like Sabrina said, they want to spend the money on stuff for themselves that they wanted for a while. I have to assume that the reason they're not eager to go out with her is that she's mean and bossy sometimes. Betty says that all she'd ever want is Archie. Sabrina, rather than summoning an Archie for her, learns her lesson and summons a charm bracelet that she tells her will attract that special boy for her. And I have to assume that the two Veronicas she summoned are gone now to explain them not factoring into the plot anymore. Betty's desperate enough to believe Sabrina about the bracelet. Either that or she knows she's a witch, because Sabrina clearly has been reading from a magic book in front of her friends out loud, and magical stuff happened because of it. They're playing dumb at this point. Betty approaches Archie, and Jughead says he thinks she's wonderful because her arm smells like a burger. So he doesn't get off her arm until suddenly he is off it and tries to eat the bracelet. There's no reason this would happen. Betty clearly wanted Archie, and he wouldn't bite into a bracelet unless he was brainwashed, but why would it brainwash him to do that? Sabrina says she's got to stop all of this magic, and instead of simply pointing, for some reason she thinks she has to turn to a page that's been ripped out. She tells Zelda she needs her help with this. It just so happens Zelda memorized every word on page 73. That's bullshit. Just have the page be in the book at that point. She's usually portrayed as ditzy in this comic, and yet she's able to memorize a page? How long ago has it been since she memorized the page? Making her have to go run to her auntie just demeans her. Zelda stands on a foot and says magic words 3 times to return things to normal. Or Sabrina could have just cast a spell, like she always does to undo the spells. Hilda tore that page out many years ago because when Zelda was Sabrina's age, she tried the same thing. That doesn't explain it. Why would she tear out only the page that's necessary to undo all of those spells? If anything, she'd tear out the pages before page 73. In fact, she would have gotten rid of the book entirely. Why do they even have it? Why would Sabrina think she'd need to say its spells when she can just point and do anything without a book? This story was about Sabrina using a book that was still in the house for no reason to grant her friends' wishes, rather than just casting a spell. She probably assumed they would think only the book was magical and not think her family is. For no explained reason, there's no consequences to her making magic obvious in front of her friends. Reggie and Archie were actually fighting over who would tell Veronica they can't afford to take her out for that date. It seems like unfair nonsense to reveal that Jughead was somehow wrong about why they were fighting, just to have the two Veronicas thing not help them. Even when she gives them money with magic, they want to spend it on themselves, which also came out of nowhere. So I have to assume they don't like her right now. Maybe it's because they found too much money at once. But Sabrina should have said that. And there's no reason Betty's wish would have not been granted properly. There's also no reason Sabrina would have run to her aunt like the helpless idiot animated series Sabrina instead of just casting a spell to undo all of the spells.